Hi, so I wanted to talk just briefly about the statues that have been prominently in the news recently, of course. Famously in Bristol, the Colston statue was pulled down and then thrown into the nearby river. Colston was a prominent slave trader 150 years ago, and it was during the Black Lives Matter recent protests that I was on during a march where the statue was pulled down. And since then, subsequently, there's been a number of vandalisms on different statues throughout the UK and I suppose in America as well. I know Winston Churchill's statue was then graffitied, and a number of other statues also that were fairly prominent as part of the protests. There's since been counter protests by the far right, people that are defending the statues, of course. Well, of course, a lot of those protesters are not part of the far right. Perhaps some of them are just simply want to protect or preserve the statues because they believe it's part of the historic legacy that they want to be taught. Well, there's a few perspectives I want to look at. First of all, I suppose my own sort of view is personally, I think with the Colston statue, it's a good thing that it was removed. Yes, everyone said it's a shame the manner in which it was done, but then I do know that there were attempts to petition the council for some number of years that failed, and there was really probably no other way. However, I do feel that there are other statues that are much more debatable and contested. With Colston, I think there probably is a majority support. He's not really widespreadly known beyond of being a slave trader. That's probably the most prominent thing that's widely known about him. Although there may have been other things too. But someone like, for example, Winston Churchill, much more famous and prominent and much more polarizing of views. I'm probably aware, though, that there are many millions of people, albeit a minority, that are opposed to his statue and would like it removed. But there's a larger majority in the United Kingdom, at least, that would want the statue to remain, in fact. Albeit for different reasons. There are those that would want the statue to remain for historical teaching, for the purpose of it being there as a reminder of that era, and that people therefore could make up their own minds of what they feel about the statue. Other people want to keep it because they admire him, they see something redeeming in his character, that he was a wartime leader, and they liked something about him, and that there was something about them that they thought was part of the national identity almost. So people had different reasons for wanting to preserve and keep that statue, but I recognise there's a larger majority of people in this country, the UK, that probably want to keep the statue for differing reasons, perhaps. Okay, and I might be in a minority that would like to see his statue removed, but then I would like to see all statues removed. So, that's my agenda anyway. So, but I live in a democratic society, and in the spirit of democracy, I should respect if a large amount of people choose and wish to have differing statues, as long as it's not overly offensive towards me. If it's not a person with an erection or a horned devil raping a person or something that is demonically offensive. If it's just a statue of a person and it's fairly moderate, and I can then say it's not deliberately done to cause offence to others, it's not illegal and immoral in that sense. So I have got no real reason in that sense to oppose it, particularly or specifically because of a type of grotesque offence. That's the exception to the rule, really. Whilst I'm opposed to statues generally, and I'll come on to the reasons why, not just because it's written in a book, in the Torah, known as the book of, I think it's in Exodus, but also in Leviticus 2, and the Old Testament is known as, of course, in the Bible. But That's not why I'm against it because it's written down, actually. The reason why I would be against statues is that they often promote a particular ideology. You'll see statues of man, for example, rather than women or children. They might promote a particular race, or gender, class, profession, or a particular type of person. They might exaggerate or distort our view of things, and project our own kind of prejudices in an external way. So anyone that was creating statues would necessarily do that. And we've seen that throughout ages anyway. You know, the different statues are an external reflection of our own internal discriminations, you know, so you can see those throughout history, you know, continents and centuries. It's not just dictators that you see statues of course. You'll see statues of various patriarchs or matriarchs even, various figures that were idolized and looked up to and deified even sometimes. And that's often, or demonized even sometimes. There's that kind of exaggeration and distortion of reality. And that's the reason why I would be against statues in that sense, because with statues, I could produce 10 million statues of one person and have them everywhere. So it would appear that someone is all-knowing and all-seeing and omnipotent, omnipresent, perhaps. I think that's what happened with Mao, wasn't it, actually? It was legal in China at one point. Every household had to have a picture of Chairman Mao. So there is a precedent where things like this have happened in the past, So it's not just sort of the wild rantings of a madman. There have been a history of madness of that nature within the world. So there are reasons, I would say, for prescribing against those things cautionarily. However, there are other people that would counter that, saying, just because there are some bad things that statues can sometimes promote doesn't necessarily mean all statues do. And, you could perhaps have a good counter argument maybe to say that you could have statues that are representative of the differing types of classes and races and genders and abilities and so on. It's possible, in an ideal world, if you ever could live in such a place, who knows. But, there's a reason why I believe it does say that. In Exodus, I think it's 24, thou shalt not make for thyself a graven image of anything in heaven, of anything on the earth, or anything in the sea below. I think that's symbolic of hell, perhaps. Anything in heaven or earth or hell. So you don't make any statues of other people, of things that you see in the actual world, or of things that you perceive as being in the heavenly world or in the hell. Angels or demons or gods. Of course, there's a reason for that, of course. There's a sort of theological angle to that also. If you sort of portray God as white or black, or male or female, or old or young, then, of course, you are sort of kind of deifying one section of society, and almost by implication as well, you are sort of casting the other groups that are being separated as not being as godly somehow. So and equally, if you portrayed someone as having horns and sort of the appearance of a monster or demonic somehow, you could demonize a race or gender, couldn't you? And how much have we seen that done in various propaganda throughout the ages? Where various subgroups of people are demonized or deified. Either approach, of course. Exaggerating someone's good qualities or bad qualities, in fact. It distorts our perceptions. So there's a reason why that within the Levitical laws, but the Mosaic commandments more essentially, that those things, graven images, are not allowed, basically. There's a good reason for that. But I'm living in a world where people have a variety of different beliefs, different sectarian beliefs, different religious beliefs, different political, social, economic, philosophical beliefs, right? So I've got to respect other people's rights, even if I don't agree with them. So, I might not agree with having Churchill's statue necessarily. I might say, well, why have we got a statue of, a man? Why are most of the statues of men? Why are most of them of wealthy people? Where are the statues of women? Where are the statues of the poor? Where are the statues of different ethnic groups as well? Where are all these other statues? Maybe we should make more statues. I don't know. But I might be opposed to it, but then I've got to respect the majority's view as well. Okay, and I agree, actually, with some of them at least. Having a statue there doesn't necessarily force you or coerce you into thinking a particular thing about that. You can still educate yourself or your children or your friends, and you can still learn about, what that statue symbolises, what that whole era that we've inherited from the colonial times, what that meant. And so, people can interpret and read into a statue different ways, of course. I actually think if you see a statue of somebody that's really large and giant, like bigger than they really would be, I look at that and I say, wow, they had a big ego, didn't they? Obviously, I probably wouldn't say that to their face, but I might do, depends. I might not say it in that way, actually. I might just say, I would have liked a lifelike statue of you to portray you as you are, because you don't need to be embellished. You're fine as you are. So anyway, I probably just don't like the idea of exaggerating things and making people look grander, bigger than they really are, But in any case, I think that I can see the merit of having it in any case. It provokes discussion, but a statue can't control where that discussion is going to go to in any case. So different people will interpret different things. So there is a good argument for having the statue, but there's also a good argument for removing it as well. So, why have a statue anyway? But from my perspective, even if I may disagree with having some statues, I would have to have very good reasons to justify me defacing or removing a statue. Like I gave at the earlier examples, it would have to be something monstrously perverse for me to destroy or remove it. And I think if it was something like that, I think the vast majority of people would agree with me anyway, and it wouldn't be allowed in a public place in any case. So I think I would have a majority support there. If it was something glorifying rape or something abhorrent like that, then I think the majority of people would say, right, yeah, we agree with you, and let's remove that, or let's vandalise it, or let's just, we don't want to promote something like that in the public realm, And but if it's a statue of a person and there's a debate contentiously about their legacy, and there may be good things about them and bad things about them, and that's a current organic debate and that's ever changing, and that it's going to be divisive whether you remove it or keep it, you've got to then listen to what other people say, not be conformed by it always, but I think you have to be concerned when a large majority of people say, we want to keep the statue, and we've got reasons for that, right? And I think you have to respect other people's views. I may not agree with it, actually, but at the same time, although I've got an argument to remove it, it's not a strong argument. It's a moderate to weak argument, rather than, if it's something that is particularly ostentatiously perverse, then I've got a good argument to remove that. But if it's just a statue of a person, and okay, their legacy may be disputed, okay, but it's not that person, there's not a million statues of them everywhere I look or something, there's not statues of them doing particularly abhorrent acts, so I don't have strong grounds for removing that. So there's good reason for me, therefore, to actually respect the majority view, even if I don't agree with it. So I guess that's my view, that I sort of, agree to disagree on some things, really. It's not such a big issue, actually, really. I think with the Colston statue, it was more of a sort of, there was more of a good grounds for removing it, I suppose, really. Uh, but I think it was less divisive, and I think Churchill and other statues besides are more polarizing and divisive. And I think probably leaving up there, it actually still allows people to have that debate, and I think that's probably okay personally. I don't see it as something so terribly awful. Um, but then, I think there is a debate about his legacy and obviously what he stood for at the same time. But having a statue of someone doesn't necessarily promote them or their ideology anyway. I could easily look at a statue and think and be admiring of that person's character just as much as I could be reminded of all their faults and dislike that, and actually be reminded of, oh yes, that's why I stand against those things actually. So it doesn't necessarily promote any ideology anyway. It could just as easily dissuade people away from such things as well. So, I suppose, yeah, they're my sort of reflections on it, really.